Don't fall in love with politicians. They're all a disappointment. They can't help it. They just are. Peggy Noonan, weekly columnist for the Wall Street Journal. All right, welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Now, you might be asking yourself again, like, DL, why are you all dressed up? Well, if you didn't notice, about a week and a half ago, I took a week off. I had to go camping. But about a week and a half ago, I started with the candidate interviews because it is election season. That means I got to bring my A game, including my appearance. Thursday is going to be the designated day for candidates. And my goal is to interview as many candidates as I can for any seat for any state. I'll do my best to have as many live as possible, but say 7 a.m. can be pretty early. So some of them may be pre recorded. Today, we head on over to Broward County, Broward and Miami-Dade counties, actually, in Florida, where Josh Hlavka joins me to discuss his run for Florida State House 105. Let's welcome Josh. Sir, how are you?
Morning, DL. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. So let's get this going. Let's start with the basic stuff here. Introduce yourself for people that may not know who you are.
Well, my name is Josh Hlavka. I am currently running for Florida House in District 105 here in Broward County. For those who don't know, District 105 makes up a about 10 by 6 triangle in the Broward County area encompassing Hallandale Beach, Hollywood, Miramar, a little bit of very far east Pembroke Pines as well. So when people are, kind of questioning, like, how can a state level race be a localized race as well? Like, this is exactly how it's very small district.
Gotcha. And I'll actually put it up on the screen here in just a second. Give me a second as I thought I had it ready, but almost. All right. So let's see. Share screen. That's what I wanted to do. All right. I've got a bunch of different screens on here, and I thought I was ready, but then I was not. So let's see if we can't quickly get this in order here. Let's see. There we are. Let's see here. Bingo, and put that up on the screen. There we are. Let's zoom in a little bit. So this is a zoomed out. So this is zoomed out. So if so people are looking, they can see that this is down in the Miami area. So the tip of Florida. And then if we want to zoom in just a wee bit more, we can jump over here. And this is the
Mhm.
district that you'll be representing if you are elected.
Yes, sir.
So there we are. We're in the Hollywood, Miramar, Pembroke Pines area for anybody that's familiar with that area. And then again, for anybody that's not, that's where it is. Let me zoom in just a wee bit more so you can kind of get an idea of where it is. All right. So now that we have it worked out where you would be running. So what motivated you to run?
I mean, I've gotten a lot of encouragement from friends and family that they felt I would be a good representative to be a candidate. And, after discussing it and kind of looking at the statistics, shall we say, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, politics is a science. Political science is a legitimate science. You can look at numbers and data and go over it and look at trends. And, just bluntly speaking, I was seeing a trend where each election cycle, my opponent was doing worse in a district where she was an incumbent in. And when you're going from historical highs to, losing almost 6% cycle to cycle,
Mhm.
that's a trend and a sign.
Gotcha.
So,
So let's take a look at some of the historical view here because I go back. So right now, District 105 is Marie Woodson, Democrat, and let's put this up on the screen so that people can see what we've got here. We'll zoom in just a wee bit. So this was the last election in 2022. Marie Woodson
mhm.
won 68.5% against Vincent Parlator, I think that's how you say it, who had 31.5%. And then if we go back to zoom back in there, go back to 2020, we have David Barrero at 53.7 Republican. So he won against Maureen Porras, 46.3. And then
N-
we'll go back one more
Now,
election cycle. Anna
DL,
Marie Rodriguez. Yes.
I hate to cut you off here, but I do want to mention here that after the 2020 election cycle,
Mhm.
d- due to the
Oh,
very interesting redistricting that the Florida legislature decided to do. District 105 went from being a very wide district that covered a lot of Broward County and even into, I believe, Charlotte County,
okay.
into that very narrow band. Like, I believe District 105 used to be something like District 122 or something, and they just renumbered it as not so much as they redid the line, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So I don't, I don't know if these ones are accurate there, but if you follow Miss Woodson's election history, it would
Mhm.
follow where it would go to there. So, I mean,
Gotcha.
I know back in 2020 because this was the same race that was ran in 2022 was ran in 2020,
Mhm.
and Miss Woodson won with 71.7 or excuse me 71.1% of the votes. But the difference is if you look at the bottom right of this screenshot here, you'll see that the total votes in the 2022 election is roughly 43, 44,000, if you want to round up.
Mhm.
In the 2020 election cycle, there was over 71,000 votes cast in the same district.
Right. There it is. Yep. 71,603.
Yes. So, this is something where, once again, you're seeing almost a 6% drop for Marie against the same candidate in the same district in a 2-year span. And I'm very interested to see how it's going to go this year, as you've kind of seen the Florida Democratic Party and their candidates be rather ineffective in Tallahassee over the last 2 years.
Gotcha. So you thinking that because of that, you will be able to, um, you know, kind of swoop in. And so let me ask you: do you have any idea why the Republicans aren't running a candidate in 105? Is it a heavy? Is it now been redistricted so it's a heavy Democrat area?
Like I said, the district itself has always been what it is.
Mhm.
They just changed the number here, but the people have always been the people. Broward County is the stronghold of the Democrat Party here in Florida. We joke about it and call it the People's Republic of the Democratic People's Republic of Broward County for a reason. There's a lot of really strong progressive Democrats down here that you just don't normally see in Florida politics. And, I would just believe that, I think the Republicans saw an opportunity that, hey, there's somebody else in the race, and, we're not really looking to get involved at that case, because reality is that we don't generally do well, and that's in my opinion, just because they got the red elephant stamp on them and not much more. This is a
Right.
very Democrat leaning area.
Gotcha. So are you reaching out in any way to Republican voters or the party for any kind of bump that you can get since they're not running a candidate?
Well, I did want to wait until qualifying had ended, which is just happened recently there. So
Mhm.
I do intend to reach out, but I didn't want to preclude the idea that there may be a last minute candidate hopping in the race. But now knowing that it's just me and Miss Woodson who's qualified for the election here,
Mhm.
that's definitely something on my plate that I'm looking into, is how to make that outreach, who to talk to exactly, and where those endorsements would likely be able to come from, if any at all.
Right. So let's talk about some differences between you and Ms. Woodson. So it looks like from online, the most recent filings, you've raised $2,300 and she's raised $77,000. Now, I don't know if any of that is self-funded or where it comes from, but let me ask you, what is your plan to really fight hard when there's such a disparity in the amount that's being raised? Because as we know, money in politics it plays a significant role.
I agree, DL, and I'd be a lot more nervous if I didn't already see this $77,000 being spent on banquets and meet and greet events. That
Mhm.
reality is, we've seen libertarian candidates who've won elections host for pennies on the dollar, if not free at all. So it's looking at maximizing opportunities to get those outreach events out there and have those opportunities. There's tons of things going on in the community. There's tons of opportunities to meet people where they're at. And I don't need to spend $10,000 on a presidential debate watch party or $5,000 on a meet and greet event. I can do that for a lot cheaper.
Mhm.
And really, a lot of the money just needs to go towards advertising. The biggest thing I'm going to have to overcome is just the political machine of the Democratic Party, because even if they're not effective in Florida, they still can fundraise in the millions of dollars. They still
Mhm.
have tens of thousands of registered voters who are willing to volunteer their time. So it's just about working smarter, not harder, in a lot of cases.
Gotcha. So she is the incumbent, which makes it a bit of a challenge. So tell me your impression of her as an incumbent, like legislatively speaking. Like, is there anything that you said, you know what, actually, I can get behind that? Or is it like, nah, it's terrible? Or just kind of, you know what, she's there, but there's nothing of particular interest to talk about?
Doing all of my research and looking into her voting history and her legislative record and whatnot, I've just haven't found anything that I could be excited about that she got behind.
Hmm.
To the best of my knowledge, that her biggest political achievement was she helped get legislation passed and like there was a co-sponsor to getting Haitian Flag Day as a recognized holiday on the calendar for the state of Florida, which is great. And, that feels good, but that doesn't put food on the table. That doesn't
Hmm.
put gas in the car for her constituents here in District 105. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is taking care of your constituents. So, I mean, I appreciate the sentiment, but we need real solutions, not feel good legislation to pass in order to help people who are struggling here in my district.
Gotcha. So actually, I want to talk about one piece of legislation she did. Now, I took a look, and it looks like she tried to sponsor about 11 different bills. None of them made it; they all died at some point. So there's not much to talk about there. But she did one of the more recent bills that she did vote yes on was HB 3, which is the online protection for minors, and that actually did pass. So I wanted to discuss that with you and just kind of get your impression of it. Before we do that, before we talk about it, what I want to do is for anybody that may be unfamiliar with it, let me play a clip. Now, this clip does not have Miss Woodson. It does have Paul Renner, who is the House Speaker. Unfortunately, there weren't really any relevant recent videos of Ms. Woodson. So we're just going to talk about this recent bill that actually passed. And then I want to just have a conversation because she did support it. So let's put that up on the screen here and let me know if you can hear.
But it's not only the federal government that's taking on social media. Florida lawmakers passing a bill last week which prevents children under 16 from even creating those social media accounts, with an exception for 14 and 15-year-olds who receive parental consent. So let's bring in right now the Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives, Representative Paul Renner. Welcome to GMA3.
Great to be with you.
Absolutely. So before we get to what happened there in Florida, let's go ahead and talk about what happened with the U.S. House of Representatives, because they just passed that bill yesterday, which could lead to that nationwide TikTok ban. What's your reaction?
Well, look, China is not our friend. They are an adversary, and we should all be concerned about their influence over our children, over everyone in the country. But our focus is entirely different in Florida. We've really looked at these social media platforms in terms of how they use addictive features and addiction as a business model. And especially when it comes to kids, we always treat adults and children differently, and we want to make sure we protect them because we see the mental health harms that result from too much time online.
Let's talk about the social media legislation that y'all just passed in Florida. Why did you think it was needed, and what are you hoping it's going to accomplish?
Well, look, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would say, yeah, kids are online too much, but what's the big deal? But once you start looking at this, you realize it's the equivalent of leaving them in a dark, dangerous alley when they spend hours and hours a day on these platforms. And we know from law enforcement that this is where a lot of sexual predators prey on children. Many and most, in fact, of the crimes against children happen online. And also the mental health harms. We know that 2 hours or more a day, you start to see those mental health harms. Over 3 hours, twice the rates of depression. And we have today almost a third of our teenage girls who have contemplated suicide in the last year. So these platforms are having a devastating effect on our children. And so we focus not on content, but on the addictive features, and said that we want children to be off platforms that use addiction as a business model to trap them online and make a profit.
All right. So your opponent voted for this bill. Would you have voted for it?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because you're a dad, I'm a dad,
Yeah.
and they're trying to address addictive features and save our children. Why wouldn't you want to save our children from scrolling, infinite scrolling? They need saved from infinite scrolling and online predators. And I will point out this, just going to make it a little tough for you. I just saw a video yesterday. So one of those guys that goes around and he hunts for sexual predators, and they confronted a guy in a Walmart. I think it was a Walmart store.
I saw that video.
And the guy was there to meet a 13-year-old girl. And they slapped him around a little bit. And then he basically, the video shows him like exiting the store and whatnot. So we know that there are real predators out there, because we've got vigilante guys. So why wouldn't you support such a bill?
So, I mean, DL, like everything you said here is nothing new, and it will continue on regardless of whether this law is passed. It's just
Mhm.
like when, anytime I hear, we're doing it for the kids or we're here to protect children, that's my biggest red flag on any legislation or law. Unfortunately, I hate to construe it the same way, but there was a certain, leader of Germany who once said that if you have the children and you control the youth, you control the masses. So,
Mhm.
I mean, the reality is anytime you hear any kind of legislation, any politician say we're here to protect children or defend children, your worst fear should be the state defending your children. As a parent, my job is to defend my child.
Mhm.
And I understand it. Like I've personally seen it in my own household already at 6 years old, how addictive social media can be. I've seen it with friends in my personal life. It's really kind of crazy, but it's like anything else, like drugs, like alcohol. Before it, you put a prohibition on something, you're going to create an even more dangerous black market, DL.
Mhm.
And just being forthright, we're both older guys. We were there for when the internet was the Wild West.
Right.
All these guys you're seeing on YouTube and Twitter now who are confronting these guys in Walmarts and restaurants, all this is just to catch a predator by another name. This has been going on for years. It's going to keep going on for years after, unfortunately.
Mhm.
As parents, the best thing we can do is be involved with our children, be attentive in their lives, but if you're relying on the state to co-parent your children, I'm concerned for your child's future, for their safety right now, to be honest.
Got it. Okay. And just for the record, I don't support the bill, despite the fact that it passed. I was a big opponent of it. Um, but I just wanted to kind of get your take on this, because I know that you're a dad, I'm a dad, and then, just kind of give voters a sense of where you stand, at least on some of the more recent legislation. So let's shift over and let's talk about your platform that you're running on here. So I'm going to pull this up on the screen and we'll just talk about it. And let's see here. And there we go. All right. So I'll zoom in just a little bit so it can be a little bit more legible. All right. Issues. You have a total of 6 issues. So let's see. Ending the state gas tax, eliminating taxpayer funds from partisan primaries, bringing recreational cannabis to Florida, passing the Defend the Guard legislation, lowering the state budget and reducing government spending, and then fighting to lower property taxes for Florida residents. So let me ask you, before we dive into any particular one of these, How did you determine on these six? What was the methodology that you used to say these are the six items that I think voters are going to care about and want to elect me on the basis of?
So the six I chose were based on one, what I would consider halo issues, which are, right now seem to be the economy. It affects everybody, it touches everybody. It doesn't matter your social class, your economic status. The economy is affecting everybody right now.
Mhm.
Just as well with all the wars we're seeing going on around the world and all of the US's involvement, which is leading to more government spending and whatnot. Another, what I would consider halo issue. People don't want to see their money going overseas and don't want to see, local troops being sent overseas to fight foreign wars for foreign governments and, involving American sons and daughters. So, outside of that, it was, picking things that I actually believe that if elected, I could legislatively get done. I
Okay.
believe that there's, appetite for a lot of this with not only my constituents and Floridians in general, but if I brought this to Tallahassee, that I could actually get some, groundwork done on it.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about number four, passing Defend the Guard legislation. Our National
Mhm.
Guard should defend our Constitution. I am a strong advocate for passing Defend the Guard legislation, ensuring that our state's National Guard is deployed judiciously and in line with constitutional principles. So, what's going on here?
So basically, what this is we want to have legislation passed that says that unless there is an actual declaration of war passed by Congress, that the federal government could no longer activate the Florida National Guard to be sent overseas and deployed overseas for foreign wars. Now, reason for why I would want this is twofold is one, just like I said earlier, I don't want to see America's sons and daughters, or even more importantly, Florida's sons and daughters, get sent overseas and deployed overseas and be put at risk with foreign adversaries who are not friendly to us. We've seen it recently just in this administration in Iraq. We've seen
Mhm.
it in multiple countries where we have forward operating bases or different training centers at where we've seen American soldiers and sailors be injured or hurt in different attacks. And it's just not worth it if we're not actually at war to be putting them in those situations. Now, the other one is kind of starting to come to fruit a little bit if you look out in the Atlantic over the last couple of days, but
Mhm.
it's hurricane season right now, DL. What would be more important than having our National Guard troops here in Florida ready to go to deploy in Florida in the event of an emergency to help our Florida citizens, especially those who could be very heavily impacted? We've seen a ton of Category 5, Category 4 hurricanes over the last couple of years hit our state. We've seen devastating damage, emergency situations where we could use our National Guard resources more effectively here in Florida than we could overseas.
Right. So, what would it do and what would it not do?
So what it would do is it would once again disallow the federal government from activating or deploying Florida National Guard troops, which are under state regulation for federal operations. So they couldn't be deployed to go overseas to Kuwait. They're not going to get sent down to Gitmo. These guys would be basically, unless the governor gives the order, they don't go anywhere. Now, what
Okay.
it does not do is keep them from being part of the military. It doesn't make them a separate entity anymore. They're
Mhm.
no longer not the Army or Air National Guard. It just means that now Florida National Guard members do not get deployed unless there is a congressionally passed declaration of war. If you're going to deploy our troops for military operations overseas, it should be to go to war. Otherwise, these troops were signed on and purposely recruited for the point of helping Florida and defending Florida in the event of the necessary national defense situation.
And to add to that, folks, here in Jacksonville, we have 19 council members, one who is a National Guard member, and he recently was deployed. I don't remember exactly where he was deployed, but I do know that because he was deployed, he did miss some votes, and some people were rather angry about that. They, you know, they might have just been angry anyway because maybe they didn't like him. But point being, he would have been here had we had passed the guard legislation. So he would not have been deployed, and he would have still been here to attend all the city council meetings and vote on all the different issues that came about. So I just want to kind of point that out to people, that this means, regular deployments that may not necessarily, this includes all deployments. So there may be some deployments where you go out and it's not as hostile, right? Like there's a remote, like a less chance, but any deployment would no longer happen unless there was, like you said, a congressional declaration for war. So this kind of forces, and I think the one thing that Defend the Guard also does is kind of backs Congress into a position where they have to start declaring war, rather than us kind of finding these clever ways to move our troops around and put our troops out in different conflicts, as we've seen over a number of years, because
Mhm.
we have not passed a declaration of war since, like, what, World War II.
But I don't think so. No, not no. And and part of the reason they do this, DL, is the regular standing army military, that's under federal control.
Mhm.
The reserves, also a federal organization. Now, the thing is that when they use the National Guard, the supplement, because the reserves don't have any combat arms
Mhm.
roles. They're strictly combat support service. These guys aren't combat arms roles. So that's why the National Guard is so important for these federal deployments, is because the National Guard does have combat arms roles, infantry, armor,
Mhm.
artillery, that kind of stuff. So when they need to go into conflicted areas, the National Guard supplements their standing armies. But without that declaration of war, we shouldn't be going into these conflicts, risking lives, spending American money on American taxpayer dollars on this. We saw it with the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. I think we spent over what, $10 trillion over the course of a decade and a half almost, and we
Right.
ended up fighting the Taliban just to hand the Taliban Afghanistan right back when we left. So, I mean, what do we have to show for it? A lot of money gone, a lot of lives lost, a lot of people whose lives have been radically changed in a negative way forever because of this. And we have nothing to show as a country. That's disappointing. And that's why, I really believe that we need to, push this legislation, whether I'm elected or not.
Got it. Awesome. All right, so let's move to another item that's on your list here. And this one actually will be on the ballot, I believe. Bring recreational cannabis to Florida. It's time for
Hmm.
individual choice and economic opportunity. I will push for the legalization of recreational cannabis, fostering an open market concept that benefits consumers, entrepreneurs, and our state's economy. So, explain this. And then, what I want you to do while you're explaining your support for this is tell me why you chose legalization over decriminalization.
So the thing is that legalization is just kind of a semantics, if you will. Most average people, if you talk about it, they don't really understand the difference here, so to speak. So, when they hear legalize, they're just like, okay, cool, I'm not going to get arrested for it. Like, yes, technically speaking. Now, I'm not really, a fan of legalization over decriminalization, DL, so to speak. Just for the fact of, when you legalize something, you allow it to be taxed and regulated, and that's my biggest concern with when we bring in recreational marijuana in the Florida. Is we saw it with medical marijuana about 6 years ago, 8 years ago, almost now, when they
Mhm.
came to Florida, where it got passed, it was legalized. And when it was legalized, you started seeing it, even in my own area, cities and towns putting moratoriums on dispensaries, grow operations, all that type of stuff. So,
Right.
that is my biggest concern, is that, when we do, because it's going to be legalized regardless of how I feel, I believe,
Okay.
but it's maintaining a free market situation with there, because we saw the growing operation was very heavily regulated. There was very select people who got grow licenses in the state of Florida.
Mhm.
I don't want to say that there was any improprieties involved, but some of these people were very well politically connected in the state. So it makes for very interesting optics, if you will. But
Mhm.
I think this is something that is going to impact the state in a positive manner economically. I think it's going to help with reducing the amount of police activity that's necessary, because towns and cities are going to deprioritize any kind of marijuana call, since it's no longer something they need to be worried about. And it's
Mhm.
going to make a lot of people's lives easier, that now, instead of having to look over their shoulder for a naturally growing plant, they are able to go into the store and buy it like a bottle of alcohol
Okay.
in most cases.
So, one of our senators, Rick Scott, he has come out and he said he will oppose this, and he opposes it on the grounds that it's addictive. Apparently, addictive is the key issue for Republicans this year. Because they passed uh, the the social media platform bill. To protect minors, partly because of addiction. He's opposing can so I was going to say medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, on the basis of addiction as well. So, how would you respond? Because he seems to have a very heartfelt story about his brother who passed away, not specifically due to addiction, but as a result of a lifelong issue with addiction. So, how do you answer the people that are concerned about, you know, maybe their friends are gonna, get addicted to marijuana, or it's a gateway drug, or any of the other arguments that would say this cannot be legalized or decriminalized for recreational purposes?
So I want to start by like hitting the big thing, because I know a lot of people go, "Oh, well, marijuana, it's not addictive," and I just humbly disagree. If you talk to anybody who's a regular cannabis user who is been dry for 2 days and hasn't used, and you will see there's absolutely addictive qualities to it, whether it's psychologically or physically. That's a discussion we can have at a different time, and it's a different discussion. But I do believe that cannabis does have addictive qualities. Now, unfortunately for Mr. Scott, I've too have had to deal with the tragedy of addiction in my life. I've had a lot of friends and family who have gone through that situation and have lost a few of them as a result. And
Mhm.
I absolutely understand that. But a lot of the reason that addicts remain addicts isn't because of the legalities or the ease of access. Like, quite the opposite. It's because of the stigma around them and the criminalization of their actions.
Mhm.
Instead of being open and honest about their addiction and seeking help, they hide it because they're worried about being made into criminals.
Right.
They're worried about going to jail and getting in trouble and having a hard time finding a job later, because this is all going on record. And then something happens and they overdose. And for some of them, thankfully, there's Narcan and other anti overdose narcotics that are out there nowadays, or drugs. But I mean, you're not going to fix the problem of addiction by banning the substance. We've seen this with the war on drugs for years.
Mhm.
Heroin is still heroin's still illegal everywhere, last I checked. Fentanyl, still illegal everywhere, last I checked. Cocaine, still illegal everywhere, last I checked. Not medically, all illegal. All have people still overdosing. Meth is still illegal. It's still made, it's still manufactured, it's still
Mhm.
sold. This is something where you got to put it on the scale and look at it from a realistic perspective of, sure, marijuana and cannabis is an addicting substance. So is caffeine. So is nicotine. So is alcohol. Have we banned any of those? Alcohol, yes. We saw how poorly that went.
Mhm.
Why are we continuing to enact a prohibition that puts mostly innocent people in jail, ruins people's lives, and makes the basis of what you need to maintain in society a lot harder, because now you're dragging around a criminal record, or worse, you're having to admit that, hey, I had a medical situation, and I need treatment.
Right.
So I get it, where you know Senator Scott might be trying to come from, that he has good intentions, and I understand his good intentions, but and part of my language, but the road to hell is paved with the good intentions of well-meaning people trying to do well. So, Mr. Scott may have a well-meaning intention, but the reality is he's leading people to ruin with that idea of continuing the prohibition, continuing the criminalization of what is in reality not a gateway drug, but a therapeutic recovery medicinal drug.
Got it. So let's just clarify something here, and you tell me if I get anything wrong. But I'm reading here from the AP. It says Florida's voter initiative would legalize recreational marijuana use if the amendment receives 60% or more yes votes this November. That would also obligate the Florida legislature to establish regulations and a framework for production and sales. Florida is among 38 states that have legalized marijuana and would join 24 others that have legalized recreational use. So, what this is saying is there will be an amendment on the ballot for Florida voters. And if it receives more than 60%, then it will pass. After which, then the legislature, which this is where somebody like a Rick Scott or you, if you get elected, would come into play, because you would be required now to establish the various regulations and framework for this. Uh, and when Rick Scott says he's opposing it, presumably if voters passed it, then what he would do is just make it more difficult, like put in all kind of rules and regulations to make it very, very difficult for Florida voters. This is very similar to what they did several years ago when voters passed the right for felons to have their passed the amendment to allow felons who were out to have their right to vote again, and they made it more onerous for them. So let me ask you, because children always seem to come up. We talked about it just a moment ago with the social media. You look online, people are going to say, "Oh, this is addictive. We got to keep it away from our children." And we made parallels to the prohibition on alcohol. Would you, as a legislator, support limiting recreational marijuana to adults only? Or would you say, look, it's going to be available to anybody? Or what kind of limitations would you be willing to accept as a legislator?
I think as a legislator, this is where I need to not try to get too deep into, the whole anarcho-capitalist mindset and work
Mhm.
with what reality actually is. I don't see many Floridians being accepting of a complete open, like anybody can get it. Um, at least initially, I think that it should probably be about the same, adults only. I'm looking at a lot of other states who have it recreationally: Colorado, Arizona, New
Mhm.
Jersey, just to name a few here. It's like alcohol. It's 21. You need the show ID to get in. I think that's reasonable at this point here. Now, is there opportunity down the road possibly to lower that age as we see the long term, pros and cons? Absolutely. But I think initially, to ease concerns for those who are opposed to it, I think 21 and older is reasonable. I think having to show ID to get in is reasonable. And I think that even if we didn't make those regulations, I think a lot of dispensaries that would come up and bit like cannabis businesses would self-regulate like that anyway. There's a perception right now that cannabis should be, about the same, regulation as alcohol. I think that's what most people in society are comfortable with, who, as it's coming around. And this is all kind of new here. So, you know, this is something we can circle back around in 2 years, 4 years and go, hey, let's look at data. Let's look at statistics and facts and figure out, is this something that is safe? Is it's something that we can consider? And it's also, how acceptable is the public going to make it?
Mhm.
I could push to let kindergartners go in and buy cannabis, but is that what the people want? Probably not. Not
Right.
at all. I don't think Floridians want kids buying cannabis. Like, that might be a great slogan for somebody at a convention somewhere, but kids buying cannabis is not what Floridians want, I believe. So I mean, yes, I would probably regulate it to adults if I had to make that decision. I
Mhm,
would probably regulate it where you had to show ID to confirm that you were adult. And I know that those aren't very libertarian positions, but
mhm.
these is also the reality of wanting to be an effective legislature or legislator and get legislature passed. So
Right.
sometimes you have to compromise. And I don't believe it's compromising principles because we can incrementally get to where everybody wants to be in the, down the road in the libertarian philosophy of things, but we need to be realistic and what are Floridians actually want? I'm not really libertarians are going to be part of my voting block, but Floridians are going to be my entire voting block, and I need to think of what if Floridians on the whole want.
Right, right, and in the reality, you would be working for the people that voted you in.
Yes.
So this is, and I think this is something that libertarians need to come to terms with. If you are elected to a position, whatever position that is, you are elected. It is not it is not, what's the term that they like to use where they say, okay, well, I've been given a blank slate. I can do whatever I want because this is, the voters elected me and they knew what they were getting. So I'm just going to go and do whatever I please at the end of the day. No, you still are subject to the votes, to the voters who have given you their votes. So let's move on over to your opponent, and let's talk about some of her platform things. And I want to see I want to contrast your perspective with what
Mhm.
she's got. So I'm going to put this up on the screen here. So number one, this is, and there's no particular order here, but the first one we'll look at is improve education. And she says our schools need the support of our state legislature. I will work with my colleagues to implement physical security upgrades in our schools, promote learning in a positive school climate while fostering open communication among staff and students, invest in our teachers by ensuring that their salaries reflect education as a priority while providing them with appropriate training and resources to master the art of teaching and facilitate parent feedback and involvement. In your opinion, what, if anything, needs to happen with education here in Florida?
People just need to be given more options, more choices,
Mhm,
have that parental choice and school choice, for lack of better words. I know we've passed legislation where, funds now follow the students and they don't stick with the organizations necessarily there.
mhm,
So, I mean, it's really kind of, advertising to people, these are your other options. You don't have to choose the public school system.
mhm,
Yes, it's not great here in Broward County. I'm not going to argue that. But providing physical security updates, that sounds like you're trying to turn our schools into a prison, Miss Woodson. Adding more, paying teachers an equal salary sounds like that money is going to go to the schools, which is going to get dumped into more administrators to upgrade your security. It sounds like more administrators going into, provide this parent teacher feedback. It sounds like more money being dumped into administrative costs and not teacher salaries, which we've historically seen this. Every
mhm,
time they put money into the schools, whether it's federal dollars, whether it's state dollars, whether it's local dollars, where does that money go? It's not the teachers. That's why the good teachers are all leaving Florida. It's why
mhm.
they're leaving Broward County. It's not because they're putting it into teacher salaries. They're putting it in administrative costs. Having administrators to make sure they're complying with all the new regulations and
Mhm.
making sure that they're up to date with all the security features necessary to make their schools feel safe and prioritized.
So how would you make parents feel that the schools are safe? Just simply say, "Hey, choose the school that you like, and we'll call it a day," or is there legislation that you might support that, putting, allowing teachers to be armed, putting armed security, professionals in the schools? Or would you just say, "Look, this is really up to the schools to decide, and they need to figure this out?"
So I'm absolutely not against arming teachers. I think that that would be an absolutely great idea. I don't understand why we are have the trust in these individuals to hire them and put them in a room full of our most precious assets as parents, which is our children, and then not trust them to be able to handle a firearm appropriately. Like it's I get some people's concern. I have seen. I went through public school. I get it. Some teachers are not always as qualified as they should be. But if you're trusting these people to educate your children, you should be able to trust them to be able to handle a firearm appropriately and in a reasonable manner. Now, as far as how to make parents feel better, once again, like I said, it's advertising what your other options are. A lot of
Mhm,
times people don't know. They just assume that I got to send my kid to the local public school. I don't have any other option here. They
mhm.
don't know what their options are. They don't have any idea. A lot of, especially, around the Meyer, this is a working class area, DL. Some people here are working two, three jobs to make ends meet. There's people who don't have a lot of free time to do the research to look into what are my other options for education. So they go for the path of least resistance, which is putting their kids in the local public schools. But it comes down to advertising. Other than that, these questions on how to best manage the school systems need to be handled locally by the school boards, by the parents going to the school boards and discussing it with the school boards and having the school board make a determination. And if parents don't like what the school board is doing, then I absolutely advocate to vote those school board members out at the next election and vote somebody you think is going to reflect what you want to see done in.
Got it. All right. Let's check out another one of Ms. Woodson's um, platform ideas. Not platform, but priorities. Well, I guess it is platform. That's what she's got it labeled as. Improve public transportation. Now, I don't know how it is in Miami-Dade, but I know that in Jacksonville is very, very big. And one of the complaints that people have a lot is about public transportation. So she wants to improve public transportation. Our community needs a public transportation system that is convenient and cost effective for everyone. In order to achieve this, I will advocate for the Expressway Authority to divert more money to public transit and less to highway expansion. Residents also need more incentives to use public transportation or ride bikes to work that are in safe paths. In this regard, I will launch a campaign to encourage employers to provide tax free transportation benefits to workers, such as bus, train, light rail, van pool, etc. We can also make our communities cleaner and healthier by using public money as incentives for green transportation technologies and to convert city buses and trucks to run on alternative low emission fuels. What's wrong with all that? That sounds pretty nice. She wants to save the planet at the same time that she offers incentives for us to ride bikes, and maybe we'll be a less fat country.
DL, I'm over here talking about trying to cut costs and save taxpayers' money, and it sounds like Miss Woodson is just looking for new and inventive ways to spend taxpayers' money here in
Right.
District 105. I mean, here in Broward County, there was a 1% sales tax added on to the state sales tax.
Hmm.
And literally, they advertise it in all the public transportation buses around here that this is your penny at work.
Hmm.
I haven't seen it get better. Everybody I talked to has said it's gotten worse. There's less routes than there used to be, as far as I'm aware. It takes longer. This is just something where people are just not interested in the service. Why do you have to incentivize something? Because people don't feel it's worth the value that you're offering.
Right.
Yes, there are a lot of people here in District 105. I see it with my own two eyes. Public transportation is a big deal here. I live right next to where the Bright Line comes by at. There's tons of bus stops around. I see tons of people who are utilizing public transportation. But the reality is, with Lyft and Uber and all of these privatized rideshare companies that are out there that are already doing this for a much cheaper price that doesn't cost taxpayers anything but what they're willing to pay for the service. I
Right.
just don't see how this is an effective means to spend taxpayer dollars and how diverting money from expanding out our roads like DL. I mean, you live in Jacksonville, you see the congestion and traffic in Jacksonville out there in the rush hour traffic.
Hmm.
Let me tell you about Miami Broward traffic, man. It is horrible. You can sit a 10-minute drive can take 45 minutes just because there are so many people, DL, on the
Hmm.
road, all going the same place. I-95, one accident, it's a parking lot. The turnpike, the same thing. the Palmetto, good luck if you're going down to Miami. God bless
Right.
and good luck.
But
It's, you know, you need a miracle.
doesn't that make the argument in some sense though, at least to say like, hey, look, there's so much congestion. Wouldn't it be so much better if instead of, 30, 40 people all in their own car, they're all now on a single city bus?
You know, DL, I would agree with you if that single city bus wasn't broken down and causing all that traffic to begin with.
Okay, fair enough. All right, and I will point out, folks, that two of the 6 items that are on Josh's on his issues list: lowering the state budget and reducing government spending, and then fighting to lower property taxes for Florida residents. Kind of go hand in hand there. Josh, final words.
Um, want to thank everybody who's watching or who's going to watch this. If you don't know, once again, my name is Josh Hlavka. I'm running for District 105 for Florida House here. If you can see down here at the bottom is my Twitter handle. If you guys want to check me out, that's where most of my social media is at. I'm also on Facebook, which if you look here, Josh Hlavka for Florida House District 105. You can find me there. JoshuaHalafka.com is my website if you want to check out my campaign platform, volunteer, donate. There's once again, Miss Woodson, as DL said, raised over $77,000 to date. Looking at all my numbers, I've raised about 2,700 with everything. That
Mhm.
hasn't been. It's going to be reported on the next filing so far, DL. So I mean, obviously, Miss Woodson is absolutely outraising me. So I need anything anybody can donate, provide. Once again, JoshuaHalafka.com. Click that donate button, throw 5, 10, $1,000 if you have it in there. Help me out there. And, all of this now is just going towards more campaign signs, more rack cards, more door hangers. We're looking into the ability to get billboard advertisements or bigger signs that we can put out on the side of on ramps and highways, guys. For the once again, District 105, it's a very densely populated area. There's a lot of major pipelines that go through for driving there. So once again, if you can, check out the website, donate a couple bucks, help me out there. And once again, I want to thank everybody who's watching here for taking the time to see what my campaign is about.
Awesome. All right, Josh, we'll hang backstage and I'm going to go ahead and close this show out. Folks, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time. I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. I want you to be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you are also subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving a comment. Remember, last but not least, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time.